We had a very good week, visiting a lot of small farms where they are definitely moving into the regenerative way of farming, and now are inviting people into those farms and wineries, vineyards. And it was so inspiring, and I really do feel at the moment that Catalonia has enormous potential to show leadership in this space. Yes, I haven't done a lot of presentations, and I don't mind admitting, because honesty is always important, that I am a little tired and fed up with PowerPoint, if you want to know the truth. But today, well, I'll tell you a little bit about my personal story. I'm English, I'm also Canadian. I went to Canada in 1973, and I arrived there at a time when they were asking the question, which seems crazy now when you think about it. We've got mining, we've got agriculture, we've got fishing, we extract resources. Do you think we could do anything with tourism? And so I had the good fortune to be there. I'd had a previous temporary job with the English Tourist Board. It was no more than 6 months, but it was on my resume, tourism. So I became the expert overnight. But not so much the expert, because we were literally going into new territory right from the beginning. And in some respects, we're in the same space now when it comes to regeneration. But it got me into tourism, so I spent 20-odd years doing conventional tourism, did quite a bit of work in technology, trying to persuade DMOs that maybe the internet was the best thing since sliced bread for them. I do tell the idea that I used to be 6 foot tall with black hair, and after 10 years of working with destination organizations and not having much success, maybe that accounts for my current stature. Anyway, but for probably the last 10 or 15 years of my time in tourism, maybe more, I began increasingly to question the model itself. And I've always been interested in so many different topics. I'm one of those join-the-dots thinkers, generalist. I'm hopeless at the detail, as Karen will attest. But I like to see the big picture and how things possibly meet and connect. So that's what I do. And so I started to look at, and I've been very interested in this whole notion of paradigm changes, or changes in the way we collectively understand who we are and where we fit in the world. The year I graduated, Thomas Kuhn wrote the famous book on paradigms. So that was another influence. So I started thinking about that. And also in Canada, I had the real privilege of being able to spend a little time back then in the 1990s with the Indigenous community. And I started to write about the relevance of that Indigenous thinking back in 1995. So everything has been a development, a learning ever since. So that's the context. And I really only got into regenerative thinking around about 2015. So I think what I love about this gathering here, not only are we in the most beautiful place, but listening to David, I'm so impressed with what you're doing with the Institute. I feel it's like almost like homecoming here, and to have all of you in the room is just with us is together. The biggest challenge we're all facing right now is, without doubt, how do we create awareness of this need to change? The current model, the dominant model, is still very, very dominant, and the discussions are always very superficial. Even regeneration gets absorbed into that model and is not transformed, but it is reshaped as to something that is not going to actually reshape the world. It's an extended form of positive social impact, or net positive, but it's all of the strength of it gets washed away because it's too uncomfortable for the dominant model to face what we're really suggesting is needed. But my first question is, this is what worries me. The other thing that really keeps me going, despite my youth, is that's questionable. Is the fact that, obviously, we as human society, particularly in the West, not everywhere, but particularly in the West and the North, is losing contact with the natural world. I think David said that very well. We're completely, in our bubbles, in our hermetically sealed bubbles. So how do we wake people up as to what is really happening, how much nature is, all the threads of nature are falling apart. So how do we call people to wake up without scaring people, without, creating resistance or fear, So I'm just throwing out a few questions. Then how do we build agency to change, to step forward, and competency, the variety of skills that we need in order to, in effect, steward this shift, which is going to happen anyway, because to me, it's a part of a natural cycle. Our current dominant system is in decline, and a new one is being born. That's utterly normal in nature, because nature never gets up there and stays there. It always goes through a cycle of emergence, increase, expansion, peaking, tipping, declining. That's normal. So, but nevertheless, we still need to develop different skills in order to get through that. Oh, what did I do? I turned off the screen by mistake. So we need a different set of skills, approaches, personality types. We need diversity. And I look around the room, and I'm pretty confident that we have here a lot of diversity of perspectives, of experience. Some people are really good at facilitation, other people who, like me, reading a lot and analyzing a lot and talking a lot. We need these different skills, and pulling those together will be really important. So the other question you might want to ask over these next 2 days is, who is here? Who are we? What are our strengths as an initial founding group? What's missing? Who do we need to bring in? But to really become aware, this is a collaborative, collective effort. We don't need lone heroes at the moment, okay? Every effort is really, really important. There isn't a single person in this room who cannot make a difference. That's how we're understanding ourselves now, thanks to science. It's all energy. Every one of us is unique. We have a unique set of gifts to offer, so don't be shy. And most importantly, how do you know what those gifts are? It's usually the things you love doing. And we've learned to be in harmony with each other. So there should be no judgment in the room. Everyone has a point to make. Let's listen, and we may disagree with it, but allow it serves its purpose at the time. Okay, the root cause, I'm going to go through this very quickly, but we all know that right now the system is unraveling. This is the Post-Carbon Institute analysis, and I point to this, and I will not spend much time this morning at all talking about the problem, where we're at, because I think you wouldn't be here if you didn't know we had one. All right? The only reason I mention this one is the way it shows you still how we have been trained to think. And this came out about 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, where the Carbon Institute looked at all the problems and separated them, all right? And that's what we're trained to do, is to identify the problem and then go fix it. We're also very often asked to do the first thing is to define whatever it is we're talking about. That's step 2, if not step 1. And what happens when you define something? You confine it. So what you're doing is you're putting it back into a box. You define the climate problem. Your thinking goes about climate. And look, we know this is working this way because we've had so many COPs. For how many COPs have we had? But they're all about climate. Only recently have we had a COP about biodiversity. And I think they're still thinking that maybe there's a connection and we should bring them all into the same room together. So that's why learning to dissolve these boundaries and start to look for connections, and impacts is really important. So, okay, we love to create words. Polycrisis was the word of a couple of 2 years ago. Now we're recognizing the challenges that we're facing are really a meta crisis. What they mean by that is there is a common root cause, and we need to get to the bottom of everything, not the surface symptoms, not the features of the problem, but get to the root cause. And there is now, I'm pleased to see a big shift coming out of some of the fairly conservative established institutions that are finally waking up and saying, wow, there is a root cause. We completely misunderstand how the world works and how we should fit into it. And this is the big shift that we're experiencing right now. This is what we call about, well, we know that Einstein had said that. I mean, he said everything at one point in time, it seems to me, smart cookie, that the world is a product of our thinking. So it's how we think, how we think. I pointed to the Carbon Institute, how we divide things into topics, how we identify problems to fix. Maybe that's not working for us. And he said that we had to change the consciousness, how we see the world. Fritjof Capra, I thoroughly recommend you read everything he's written. He's inspired me over 20 years. Says it's a crisis in perception. And the other thing I really like the idea of meta-crisis is that it's calling for a metamorphosis, depending on how you say the word. That is the kind of change that is so deep that once you've made that change, you cannot go back. Once you see something, you cannot unsee it. Once you learn something, you cannot, or with a great deal of difficulty, can you unlearn it, all right? So that's the kind of change. And the analogy that's been used is that of a caterpillar. It's very appropriate for us as humanity right now because the caterpillar spends most of its life literally crawling along the floor, eating and eating and eating, until it gets so fat it has to go to sleep and falls its cocoon, hangs upside down, seems inert, but what's going on inside the body of that cocoon is, the body of the caterpillar, I should say, is that there are other cells in its DNA. They actually call them in science imaginal cells, which I think is amazing, because this is this idea that there's another imaginary being inside, or cells within their body that's capable of imagining something else, way beyond the imagination of the caterpillar in that form. And what happens is, over time, those imaginal cells they're individual. Does this sound familiar? They're individual. And then gradually they start to join up. And as they join up, they start to eat what's rest of the decaying body of the caterpillar. And eventually, when that body of the caterpillar has been absorbed by these imaginal cells, then this creature is capable of coming out of the cocoon and becoming a beautiful butterfly. Now, the lovely thing about that story is it's not fictitious, okay? The science is there to support it, but as it's both an event and a reality for that particular species and some others, but it's also the most powerful metaphor of the time that we're living in now, right? So every one of you is an imaginal cell in the sleeping caterpillar of our society right now. So join up. That's why it's so important now that we start having more and more and more of these meetings and holding each other's hands, because this is tough. Imaginal cells aren't immediately liked by the old decaying caterpillar body, all right, because it knows it's going to be eaten up by you, I suppose. But anyway, so to me, I think I don't hesitate to use this wonderful metaphor. Many people don't understand what a paradigm is. They confuse it with a mindset. The key thing is it's about how we see the world, how we assume it works, the values that we hold as a result of that way of seeing, the beliefs we hold, and then what action we take as a consequence. So mindset, on the other hand, or I should back up, I'm saying this is collective. There is a collective paradigm here. It has variations. It's based on our own personal experience, what we were told by our parents, what we were taught at school, what we've seen on the television, how we talked in the schoolyard. We've absorbed all of these things over a period of time. And very often people aren't even aware they've got one of these things called a paradigm. So as I say, the first step is waking up and becoming aware of what has been driving your life up until now. What assumptions have you carried with you that you may now want to question because they don't work for you anymore? So just to, again, and I'm partly giving this presentation like this because there are many of you in the room for whom this regeneration is new. Maybe I could just ask that question. How many people feel they understand what regeneration is about? Go ahead, be confident. All right, so I'm not going to spend too much here, but the key thing is how can we learn from each other how to tell this story? You know, at a dinner party or when we're presenting a new idea for a new program at the university, we need to be good communicators in explaining this story. I'm not saying I'm any better communicator than anyone else. I'm here also to learn from you. Many of you are teachers in this room. Many of you are really good facilitators in this room. And I don't have those skills. But I believe we all need to be aware that we are going to have to become communicators and use different stories and different approaches. So people need to understand what a paradigm is, and I usually, there are other images, but how many people see a duck? Super quack. How many see a rabbit? Same people. How many see both?
You have to ask how many people saw the video.
Oh.
The video to your last conference.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll have to change the picture. How many people saw the video? Is it on Netflix now or something? Well, the nice thing is lots of others. This is used in classic psychology, but it is both. So if you saw the video, you know it's, well, it isn't both. It's you can see a pattern of a duck and a pattern of a rabbit in just what is a bunch of dots on a piece of paper. And the point being is every single one of us is seeing the world slightly differently from everyone else. That's why sometimes communications break down. But once we have identified the kind of collective paradigm that we have and agree that it's not working, and we decide consciously to take steps to update it, let's say, and why would we update it? Well, the old paradigm was based very much in the northern hemisphere, the Western world, whatever you want to call it, on material science, which has occurred since Newton and Descartes and Bacon started it off. But right the way up until the turn of the century, our paradigm has been based on what the old classic physics told us and the old classic biology told us. Contemporary science has turned that upside down. It should be common knowledge, but it's just barely seeping into the school system that the world is not the way it was taught to our grandparents or even our parents or even 20 years ago. So once we do change that paradigm and see, and I'll talk about the nature of that change, it as a living system, everything else is going to change. And that's the power of this. All of a sudden you'll see things popping up all around us that wouldn't have been possible even 5 years ago. And that's the advantage of being older. You see change, all right? Because to be honest, the last 5 years I've seen more change in terms of awareness of this than I've ever seen before. So it's picking up speed. So if you have seen the movie, that's the problem when you do these speeches now. You can't do them again, can you? Because you've all seen it before. I'm going to try to move into territory that was not on the ITB presentation. So for those who have not or are still not quite sure what this difference is, and again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but the point is we have been conditioned to think of ourselves as, first of all, very separate beings, you know, that I'm very separate from you. This place is separate from others. I can look at reality, I can look at this table, and I can examine it objectively because it's a thing. The reality is it's pure energy. And the minute I start to look at it, that energy of that table is changing. In other words, I'm having an interaction with that table, if you can follow that. It's difficult because it's so different to everything that we've been told, But it just reinforces this notion that every single one of us now matters, because every thought you have, every action you take is energetically going into the total energetic field of the universe. So if we start feeling very positive about our capacity to make this transition, it will start in itself slowly to accelerate the speed with which we can do it. So again, the machine story, we live it every day, that we separate functions. In tourism, we separate tourism from, I haven't got the graph here, but I can make it available, into different, different sections. We've got the accommodation, we've got the transportation, we've got the services, et cetera, et cetera. That's just one relatively petty example. We separate our understanding into subject areas, into disciplines. And I'm sure any one of you that's gone through university knows that the psychology department does not talk to the physics department, right? And so this is always this sense of separation, separation, separation. And that is really inhibiting our ability to move. It's extractive. I mean, it sees the planet as a lumberyard floating in the universe. Spinning around, but it's a lumberyard of resources that we can go and extract from, make them pretty, but they throw them out when we've had enough, and that's it. That's obviously proving to be very unsuccessful, not very sensible thing to do. Anyway, there are all these features. I'm not going to them into detail. I think you're going to experience in the next 2 days what a living system looks like. I love the fact that you see Cerdanya Viva, this place, this building, your team, the activities, everything associated with what you're doing here as a living system, constantly adjusting to what's going on outside. This place, this system will be different as a result of this weekend. That's going to be an obvious sort of feature of that. So again, everything, instead of being separated, is connected, it's interdependent. We are fundamentally not just part of nature, but we are nature. And this is a way of seeing the world that is throughout the indigenous communities that still have survived the brutality of our Western ideology, because we tried to eliminate many of those societies around the world. But they've been living this set of beliefs or approaches for their entire existence. And so therefore it's not surprising that even though they've only got left about 5% of the land on the planet that they actively have control over and can manage, because we put them in, shrunk them in their area of, that they can be living in, to 5%, they now are responsible for 85 or 80% of the biodiversity of the entire planet. So to me, that says that we have so much to learn. And what I also find exciting is that so many of the fundamental principles behind regeneration are very, very similar to those indigenous principles. So when we talk about regeneration, the RE in that word is there for a reason. What's the reason? I just want to see if you're awake. Yeah.
Because we are generators.
Yeah. Means it's the same beginning for the word remember. And the word remember means to put pieces back together. So the separate pieces are brought back together, but it's in our DNA somewhere. So once we start to let go of our assumptions, once we start to let go of our fears, once we start down this journey, you will find it easier and easier, because your body, like the caterpillar, the butterfly and the caterpillar, is waking up inside. All those ideas too, it's a pattern that repeats. And nature does enjoy patterns that repeat over and over again. They're called fractals, but we're not going to go into those this morning. It's a bit too much. So where are we now as humans? And I show this because I work in the tourism sector. We've gone from extracting value right the way up, I would say, until around about Rachel Carson's time in the 60s, when we woke up to the fact that, oops, we have this, expanding economy, everything's got all this great new technology, and then the birds started to fall out of the sky, and she wrote Silent Spring. Now that was a brave act, you have to admit. We talk about pioneers. So she really sort of raised the alarm, as it were, and that was the birthplace of the sustainability movement. Now the problem with the word sustainability is that it's a verb that you need to have an object for. You need to know what you're trying to sustain. When they came out of the Brundtland report, they genuinely wanted to sustain life on this planet in a healthy way, and that's why they said, so that they could be sure that future generations would be able to inherit it as they were enjoying it in 1982. It's pretty messed up then anyway, but still they had an idea that we wanted to pass it on in good shape. Unfortunately, a lot of the generations of the future they were talking about are here now, and we're not enjoying that. That aspiration has not been realized. In fact, it's infinitely worse than it was back then. But nevertheless, we really thought we could then try to do less harm and mitigate the damage, as it were. And again, look at the language that we use. This is a sort of mathematical language. Net zero, how are we ever going to manage that? And that you can only do net zero if you're measuring the same thing. And yet what we're talking about, you know, the cost of the qualitative variation is just too huge. There's no way we'll ever be able to come up with a net zero equation that has any validity whatsoever, but sounds really good. The economists love it, the politicians love it, but it's absolute rubbish. But so now, all of a sudden, the bright person thought, right, it'd be so much better if we could do more good and now start to give back and call it net positive. That's equally impossible to achieve, but it's better. We talk about positive social impact. I'm not against that, but I'm just pointing out that some of these terms really reveal how our mind works, right? So we're now talking about giving back and doing good. And one of the problems with that, again, is what is good? You know, and in tourism, I get really upset because they've defined that as a traveler, a visitor, leaving this place better than they found it. Well, first of all, the traveler's not responsible for leaving your operation better than you found it, David, is they? Are they? You are responsible as the host. And secondly, there's this notion that what do I, as a traveler, have the right to tell the place I'm going to that I've never been to before, I know what's good for them. That's colonialism in a new guise, all right? And that's one of the dark underbellies of tourism that we've never really faced. So it's all bleeding in the right direction, but it isn't far enough. And that's why I've got this here, because until we go through that internal change of changing the way we see ourselves, not as objects, not as separate, but as living beings on a living universe with a living and vital responsibility for living in a way that helps that universe, helps that world we live in flourish and thrive, then we're going to get stuck. And that, I have to use this a lot because many people in the tourism sector don't realize that we can't call it regenerative until we've gone through this. So any problems so far with what I'm saying? I don't think it's new to many of you, but so I'm not going to go talk too much right now, but the fundamental difference is, even though here we can do restoration projects, unless we're seeing that we are not doing something to nature to fix it, but that we're entering into an ideally humble partnership with nature, to work with nature, to listen to nature, to learn from nature, to help her restore itself. Because we can't restore, we can't change it. We can help create the conditions for that to change to happen. And we then need to build our own capability to be able to do that. That's where the really hard learning and development takes place. That's what they mean when they talk about, and I think David used the word, co-evolve. So here we're together, learning together, co-evolving together in complete partnership and collaboration. This is just another diagram that's circulating a lot now. I only put it up here because it's the decline of the old system that becomes compost for the new. I really like that idea. So don't worry too much about things falling apart, because they have to in order for the new to be born. The second point is it is emerging, all right? It doesn't come out with a complete set of instructions or nicely packaged, and it's this, and not that, and this. It's emerging. It could change shape quite a bit during this process of kind of emergence and birth, if you like. It also shows the people up in the old system who are trying to do something new, like you are. Someone, when I was in last week in Catalonia, called them seedlings, which is quite a nice word. I like pioneers, but because what you're seeing here is when those pioneers join up, that's when things start to change. And that's why I think this next 2 days is really important, because we need to be joining up and helping each other. Now, a lot of words up here, but I put them there because for many people who've not heard of regeneration, they need it kind of like in black and white. But the most important thing is it's not a buzzword. We're moving from an economic machine to a living system. It's a process, it's a verb. There are no regenerative anything, right? If they say you're a regenerative destination, they have no idea what they're talking about, all right? It's a regenerative process where we're all can be engaged in. And the most important thing that I like the most, because this is what I ask people to take away. If you don't remember anything else, it's what life does, right? We are life. What life does, and it has been doing for nearly 14 billion years, is it's constantly creating the conditions for life to thrive and evolve. So the little algae that, my science isn't that good, but the little algae that came out of the sludge and soup of 14 billion years ago that managed to get on land, they didn't know that they were creating the conditions for us to be here now. But that's what was happening. It's just taken 14 billion years to go from those tiny little algae to the beautiful people we have sitting in the room here. All right, but that's what life does. So the question I say to people is, if you really want to think regeneration, ask yourself every day, am I creating the conditions for the life of which I am a part to thrive and evolve? Now, that life could just be your family, or it could be your business, or it could be the community you live in. But am I making a contribution for that life to thrive? So the other point I make out is, you want systems change? This is it. So how are we teaching it? I'm just going to, for the last bit, I'm struggling right now to think about the best ways to communicate this, how to begin to start to learn. And I'd be more than happy to change this and get your input, because I know a lot of people will approach this in a different way. But the way my mind works, I suppose, is I'm saying, okay, this is the, it doesn't have to be a star, it could be something else, but I'm saying we first of all have to really take apart and put back together a paradigm, a way of seeing, being, and doing that we think will work, or we can learn from the nature, because the paradigm is we are nature, nature is our teacher, nature is who we are. So we start off really facing that paradigm shift head on, and then we really spend some time learning how nature actually works. And once we've learned how nature works, then maybe we can come into alignment with nature and alignment with life and behave the way that nature behaves. Then I think we're going to make a huge shift. Then all I've done here is say this paradigm and these principles can either be practiced or understood when we look to maybe what is our purpose. You know, who are we as human beings? How do we work together? understanding that we each have that potential. And what is the contribution that each of us can make based on that potential? Place is critical because in ecology, it all is about place. I'll come back to that in a minute. But, and there's nothing hard and fast about that, but that's just a way of organizing the knowledge as I see it. So very, very quickly, and am I speaking too long? I've got 10 minutes? Okay, very quickly. Over the next few days, we might be investigating, and you'll be hearing from different presenters, that it's wholes, not parts. It has to occur in a place. Cerdanya is a place. It's unique. The sun falls on this place uniquely. This doesn't happen anywhere else on the planet. There's nowhere else on the planet that has that unique combination of geology, hydrology, ecology than in this place. And because of that, we have to always respond to where we are. That's why you cannot do regeneration unless you're doing it in a specific place, right? So you're seeing that happening in real life. But when you go around and look at what David's doing here, ask yourself, how does this reflect the uniqueness of this place, the energy of this place? And so on, everyone matters and diversity is vital. And the more we get into these fundamental principles and allow things to emerge instead of trying to do things. Create the conditions, step back. That's what you've done here, David. You've created the conditions over a period of time. You saw that this morning. Okay. So we apply those principles to why are we here? And I believe we have to, in tourism, I have to go back to why does tourism keep putting its purpose stated as growing, 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 when in fact, and taking, why doesn't it make its purpose what nature does, which is to contribute to the health and well-being of the system of which it is a part? Sorry, I don't know why they're coming up out of order, but that's technology. There were something about Apple and Mac still don't talk to each other. Anyway, not to worry. But as I say, who we are, what is our identity on a human level? But more importantly, what is our identity in the collective? If you're in a particular place, who are we in this place? So you cannot do regeneration without really creating and or responding to an existing community and enlivening it in some way, but you cannot do this in isolation. Community is first and foremost. And it isn't for the tourism bodies to create those communities, they already exist. But what they can do, because they're already involved in marketing and selling them or what have you, they can help convene the meetings that would enable that community to say, who are we and what do we want? The biggest problem in Barcelona right now is those decisions were not made by the citizens of Barcelona. That's why they're on the streets. They weren't even consulted, let alone engaged, so that they could participate in saying what kind of city they wanted to live in. The other key thing is we really ideally focus not so much on the problems, but what is the potential of this place, the potential of this person. Because as I said, each of us has a unique set of gifts to offer. It could just be, I just like, in the garden, sowing, digging up things, or whatever it might be, or another person it might be, I love going into a person's house and cleaning up the mess. I don't care what that purpose is, but what drives you, what gives you pleasure, what keeps you going. But it is more about releasing that potential than starting by defining a problem, because if you define the problem, you will define the solutions in response to that analysis. Anyway, so the biggest I often ask people is really quite simple. What do you want for your children? And I ask them, well, I'll ask you. What do you want for your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews? What do you want for them? Just throw out words. I'll find out how really regenerative and enlightened you are. What do you want for them?
Fresh food.
Fresh food.
Harmony.
Harmony, right, I love it. Pardon? Okay. Any others?
Water.
Water, not just things, but what do you want for them and their being?
Relationships.
Yep. Do you want them to have what? Healthy relationships? Yep. Anything else? Security, yeah. To be happy, love, and to be themselves, right? To have lots of health and vitality. No one ever says they want their children to be sustainable. And that's not my joke. I'd love to take credit for it. It's the guy that started the circular economy. But it's a beautiful way of putting it, because you realize how stupid. Why are we putting all our energy into becoming sustainable when we are missing what we could really be aiming for? So, all right, last 2 slides. You can relax over there. I'm sorry, Charles. I think right now the most important thing we can do, more than anything else, we've got economic problems, we've got social problems, you name it. But the most important task we have is to bring life and health back to the land. And that's why in a place like Catalonia, it's going to happen in places like this and all the way down to the coast. Currently in tourism, the tourism people are totally obsessed with the coast because that's where all the money is and where the visitors go. It's also where all the problems are. They don't consider this part of their own region as important. But this is enabling the business on the coast of Barcelona to exist, let alone to get rich and wealthy. So this is where agriculture and hospitality come together. And again, very quickly, what's happening now is that this shift in paradigm is happening within agriculture. Everyone here knows about big industrial agriculture that is generating food with these vast machines, food that doesn't nourish us at all. I mean, most people perhaps are not aware of the fact that the food is rubbish. I think you all know that, right? Whereas what's really happening is it's the smallholders that are taking care of the soil, that are working regeneratively, that are working collaboratively in many places in community. This is the shift in agriculture. We can say the same thing of tourism. This is not the coast of Catalonia. This is the Costa del Sol, but it's the big investment scale. It's extractive, standardized, focused on efficiency and just plain awful. But that is the machine story at work in tourism and hospitality. And over here we've got the opposite, which you can see all around you outside the window. So one of the features that they have in common in terms of regenerative agriculture, where frankly, the nice thing about regen ag is it's mostly a practice, a physical practice that you can describe. You know, I'll come back to that in a minute. But the key thing to notice is all farms are rooted in place. The key thing to notice about all small holding hospitality businesses is they're rooted in place. And the one thing that brings them together is food, ideally wine too. And this notion of terroir, which they understand, that is each plate in front of you that you're about to eat can have a taste specific to that place. And now the marketers recognize, thankfully, that that is kind of handy. So we're working with that energy around terroir, but it, again, to bring about this kind of transition. And I'll do this really fast. You'll get the slides anyway, but I'm saying why is food such an important change agent? You know, it revitalizes, it nourishes, and that's what we all need right now. We need to be healthy internally and we need to be able to understand which plants and which ways of preparing food can do that. Food attracts, it gathers. That's where food enables communities to start to form if they didn't exist already. But a lot of our conversations nearly always will be at the dinner table and when we get together after the lecture. The conversations you have later today around food or just while you're eating will be probably more important than listening to people like me. But as I said, they express the unique identity and culture of a place. They begin to create awareness in the people doing the eating and the drinking and the talking that there's a fundamental relationship between their health and the health of the land, the water, the soil. It generates livelihoods. It sequesters carbon. But two things I think are really important. Food can heal, it can make us whole and healthy, but we can use food as a way of educating or teaching people about our relationship to land. So I'm going to skip these slides and talk because I think I've done enough. This is a really simple diagram, but I was using this to talk to the tourism people because they're now developing regenerative experiences, which just fascinates me because they haven't really understood what regeneration is, but they've now learned how to package it up and sell it, you know. Oh, I've got a regenerative experience to sell you. But I tried to point out that each regenerative experience that combines farming and hospitality happens in a very specific place. It can't be designed in Barcelona, right? Sorry, I love my simple graphics. I could get all this done professionally, but these are quite better this way. So the blob is place, all right? And again, I tried to get this changed, but sorry for this typography. It was just typography, it didn't work. So every place is ecological. It has its own geology, its own geography, its own hydrology, its own vegetation, its own wonderful ecosystem of animals serving different functions and all the rest of it. But this, from a physiological point of view, defines or gives the color to the place, but then superimposed on top of that, of course, is the fact that humans have been there for many years. So you have the culture, the history, the economy, and the community. But then I was trying to explain what is a regenerative experience. It's when the host receives a guest, or the guest meets the host, and they have an encounter. So the word experience is getting a little bit sort of, you know, sterilized a bit, but the word encounter has a lot more magic in there, because every one of those encounters, you can package an experience, you'll never be able to package an encounter, right? And that encounter should somehow spark in each process, each person, host and guest, something that makes them feel more human, more alive, and more connected. Which is a heck of a lot different than saying the hospitality sector is going to create these experiences to transform the guest. I can't transform anybody. You can't transform anybody. You don't know what the impact. I'm pointing at David. Sorry, David. So there are some similarities right now in between the two sectors. I think I've spoken too much, but I can give you the slides. But we are shifting in agriculture from volume to value, to nutrition, to quality, and ideally in hospitality too. Anyway, you can read this quicker than I can say it. And all I was doing here was showing that the nice thing about regenerative agriculture, it's a lot easier to explain than regenerative hospitality, because there are practices that are very specific. But hospitality is the place to start, because that's the business that hospitality people are in already. Hospitality is the act of caring for a stranger. It's the oldest activity after preparing food in our entire history. Even when we were in the caves, we were welcoming a stranger, or sometimes killing them, but you know. But we have grown from that. And the best example, I think, is when you're in the desert. The Bedouin culture, for example. The Bedouin will give their last little drop of water to a visitor. That's fundamental to hospitality to them, at their own expense. But that's built in, because if they didn't do that, they could never leave and travel across the desert if they didn't know that someone was going to be as generous to them. That, to me, is the sign of true hospitality. So that's it. I wrote a paper a few years ago called Host for Life, which was really about this connection, and it was focusing on carbon. But now that's being rewritten, when I can ever sit still long enough, because it's not about carbon anymore. It's about everything. It's about water, it's about climate, it's about land and food security. So, in conclusion, and I hope I haven't gone too far, Charles.
I could listen to you for hours.
Well, In conclusion, that's very kind of you, but I can't listen to myself for hours. In conclusion, the most important thing we can do right now is bring back life to land and water, our places, our homes, our everything, each other, families. I love that back to life is, to me, a beautiful expression. Because life has a life force. It's that life force that makes us feel vital and alive. These two sectors, I think, are ideal places to start, but we must widen our vision. And that's it, really. Thank you. I'm supposed to leave that up there for a while. Thank you very much.